For over 1,000 years, humans had worshipped the 5 true gods: Dwayna, Balthazar, Melandru, Grenth, and Lissa. They were mysterious travellers of the mists, who, in a time long ago, had found the world of Tyria in a state of disrepair. They shaped it, bringing new life and undoing damage left in the wake of some older threat now silenced. Soon, Tyria became the lush and beautiful world humanity had come to live in. The gods lived in the holy city of Ara among mankind. The city's streets were lined with statues to them, and great parades were made in front of their quarters. Originally, there were 6 gods, but when Abaddon, the god of water and secrets, gave magic to the races of the world, it caused chaos as they turned it on one another in warfare. A man named Doric, who would later become king of all mankind, saw this destruction and travelled to Or, where Ara was located, to meet with the gods. He pleaded with them to take back their gift of magic, lest the world tear itself apart, and they conceded. Abaddon, though, did not agree. He fought the other gods against the decision, and only the combined might of the other 5 was enough to silence him, cast down and imprisoned within another reality, the realm of torment. Magic had been gifted to the races with the Bloodstone, a large chunk of magical rock. With an offering of Doric's blood, the gods split the Bloodstone apart. Its shards were cast into the caldera of a volcano on the hellish Fire Island chain, and, with that, the gods left Tyria and returned to the mists. For the next 1,000 years, they'd continued to interact with the world, but only from a distance, sending ambassadors or avatars in their place. They'd abandoned Ara, and though Or grew and changed, its holiest of cities remained the same, preserved in the hopes the gods would, one day, return. Their quarters were left derelict and intact, until all was sunk to the bottom of the ocean in the Cataclysm, many years later. 1072 years after the Exodus of the Gods. 1 year after the Cataclysm. The band of Ascalonian refugees stood on the banks of the Amnoon oasis. They'd been told to ascend, which would give them the gift of true sight. This could be used to defeat the White Mantle, as was written in the Flameseeker prophecies. But how? Vizier Kilbron had not elaborated before leaving their company. They'd come to the Crystal Desert, far south of Ascalon and the Shiver Peaks. Many over the centuries had visited the wasteland, seeking ascension for themselves, but they, and the brief civilizations they birthed, had all ultimately been swallowed by the sands, their scattered remains the only evidence they ever existed. Long before even this, the whole region flowed with water. It was called the Crystal Sea. A group of men, the Marganites, sailed its waves, but when Abaddon, god of water, was cast from the world, the sea dried up. Now only the deteriorating ships of those seafarers still endured from that ancient time before the Exodus. The Crystal Desert was inhospitable and secluded from the outside world. A few men eased out a meagre existence at the Amnoon oasis, but deeper inland were only the passive ghosts and spirits of lost civilizations lingering on Tyria, where they had once failed to ascend. One such ghost was Chirai Ossa. Once a hero of his people, he had led them to their end on the dunes. He failed those who believed in him, and now his spirit was unable to pass to the mists. Only by redeeming himself and helping others attain ascension, or become closer to the gods as he put it, could Chirai leave the desert and finally reach the afterlife. He became something of a guide for the heroes. Ascending meant reaching Augury Rock, a mesa to the east, perhaps once a lone island in the surrounding seas, now turned to desert. The site was curious, and clearly the mesa was not entirely natural. Long markings were etched into the cliff face, and located nearby were a collection of peculiar stone objects. Chirai explained that Augury Rock was hollow. There was a sacred hall deep inside it where they could ascend, but to reach it first the heroes had to complete 3 steps of a ritual. This would not be simple, as this would draw unwanted attention from a race of serpent people, the Forgotten. In truth, the Crystal Desert had not beaten every civilization that came to it. For the Forgotten, the sands were the last safe place on all of Tyria. These serpents had once served as protectors and watchers of the planet while it was being shaped by the gods, but they had been fought, killed, and pushed back over the years, until now only the Crystal Desert was safe to them. Since the exodus of the gods, the Forgotten in the desert had served their mistress, the Oracle. On her behest, they watched over the trials of Ascension, ensuring only those worthy would find success. Not necessarily evil, the Forgotten would fight and kill those who could not stand up to them. The first task was to draw the gaze of the gods. Years past, Chirai-Os's people, the Elonians, had built themselves a temple for this purpose, but it was since captured and a pretender now sat on the throne. Chirai led the heroes to reclaim it, and, after a hard-fought battle against Forgotten and the mammoth siege worms of the desert, it and the gaze of the gods was won. This needed to be focused in the second task, with the Vision Crystal, an object split in 3 fragments that were strewn about ruins to the north. The Elonians, distrustful, had obsessed over the fragments they found, forming splinter factions that hoarded them. Unable to unite, their infighting doomed them, and it was here that Chirai-Os's people failed to become closer to the gods. Harried by Forgotten on all sides, the heroes travelled to the final resting place of each shard and rebuilt the crystal for themselves. Under the focus of the gods came the last task, for the heroes to prove themselves worthy to the Forgotten once and for all. South at the Thirsty River waited 6 teams of the Snake Men, each prepared for a fight to the death. One by one though, the Forgotten and their priests were slain, and upon sure victory, the ritual was complete. The heroes returned to the Mesa. They placed the Vision Crystal on a stone pedestal at the base of the cliff, where a light from above shone down and was focused upon it. 3 nearby stones carved into the floor, one representing each past test, began to glow, and suddenly the entire Mesa split open in an explosion of light, revealing the way inside. One at a time, each hero stepped forward. The Hall of Ascension was a circular room of otherworldly golden architecture, adorned with elaborate paintings and statues of the gods. In its centre was a Doppleganger. To ascend, the heroes had to defeat themselves. A battle of wits as much as strength. Only when they could outsmart their ghostly imposter and slay it did each hero, in turn, pass the final test. The hall shook, filled with light, and then they knew they were closer to the gods. They had ascended. Chirai's spirit was now free to leave Tyria. The various afterlives and realms of the gods existed in the mists, a magical expanse that bound the universe together, past, present, and future. Many years ago, a powerful mage, Lord Odron, had created a portal to the mists, hidden deep in a tomb of primeval Elonan kings, and Chirai schemed to travel through it himself. He and the heroes parted ways. For the heroes, though, the Forgotten lowered their weapons, and showed the way to their mysterious master, the Oracle. She lived in the desert, but her lair was concealed in a single crystalline grain of sand, near impossible to find without access to the teleporter entrance. Further, it was protected by 6 dragon spirits, facets of the prophet herself. Indeed, Glint, the Oracle and weaver of the Flameseeker prophecies, was herself a dragon, a living relic of the world before the human gods had ever come to Tyria. Many years ago she had foreseen the events now taking place, and now the chosen destined to defeat the White Mantle and their unseen masters stood before her. But how could they fight gods? Glint revealed the true nature of the Unseen Ones. Not gods, they were merely a race of expert ancient spellcasters. They were called the Messart. With magic of their own devising, the Messart had mastered the art of concealment, and only with the gift of true sight, attained through Ascension, could they be seen and killed. This is why Kilbron had guided the heroes to the desert. Much had changed in the world while the party travelled the wastes, though. There was still hope for the Shining Blade, but Avinia and Saidra, their 2 remaining leaders, were captured in the southern Shiver Peaks. Time was short. With this, the heroes travelled to the mountains and rejoined the conflict between Blade and Mantle. What of the Vizier and the Sceptre of Awe, though, Glint did not say. After the Bloodstones were cast by the gods into the volcano at the Fire Island chain 1,000 years ago, it had erupted, sending the shards across the land. One chunk had landed in the Maguma jungle, and another was in the southern Shiver Peaks. This proved advantageous to Confessadorian and the White Mantle, as the Shining Blade stragglers in the Shiver Peaks could be executed upon it in the same way they had been murdering the Chosen. The Shining Blade still didn't know why the White Mantle were doing this, but Avinia and Saidra awaited that very fate. Fortunately, the mountains were no safer for the White Mantle than any other humans. This was dwarf territory. The hate-filled Stone Summit, led by Dagnar's Stonepate, Prince Rurik's murderer, were making progress in their civil war with the Deldrimor dwarves, and they would kill any human, irrespective of whether they mantle or blade. This may have brought the newly ascended heroes some time. They travelled to Droknar's Forge, a large Deldrimor stronghold, and once again made allies with King Jarlis. They agreed that the heroes and Shining Blade would fight the Stone Summit if the Deldrimor dwarves helped fight the many White Mantle and Messart forces that had come to the area. In fact, now that the Messart could be seen, it became clear how many of these supposed gods there really were. They swarmed the Shiver Peaks, determined to defeat the Chosen prophesied by Glint to kill them. The Unseen Ones had no preference or care for dwarves or their allegiances, and killed both Stone Summit and Deldrimor alike. The Shiver Peaks were in turmoil, a group in every corner built on uneasy allegiances, vying for control. Messart patrolled and guarded the cages which held Ivinia and Saidra. While they could now be seen, it was soon obvious they could not be fought. The Messart still possessed a devastating magic, Spectral Agony. So strong, just 3 Messart had used it once to repel an entire Char invasion force that marched on Kryta. Without a defence, there was no hope for the heroes. The only way forward would be to sneak past the Messart. This the heroes did. They blew open Saidra and Ivinia's cages, reuniting for the first time since the White Mantle ambush at Sanctum K. Yet, they were spotted, and a gathering of Messart encircled them. Caught with no defence, there was no chance for escape, but Saidra, despite Ivinia's pleas, fled from the scene into the thick of the Messart, sacrificing herself. Strong, she was not immediately cut down, and she brought Ivinia and her friends enough time to slip by before succumbing to the Messart. Hotly pursued, the party fled through the mountains to rendezvous with the Deldrimor forces nearby, who lifted them to safety. With another ally killed and the Messart's power made clear, Ivinia hatched a plan. First, she wanted vengeance for Saidra's death and the breaking of the Shining Blade. Marcus, the traitor, who had been leaking information to the White Mantle, had been spotted nearby with a host of Mantle and Messart. Ivinia would hunt him down and kill him. Additionally, the Deldrimor dwarves, themselves just as ancient as the Messart, told tales of a great war the Messart once waged with another powerful, now defeated race, the Seers. There was a surviving Seer nearby, and it could perhaps offer Ivinia and her allies advice on how to counter the Messart's Spectral Agony. They set off. Not difficult to find, the Seer was in a small cave plagued by spirits. It floated eerily as the Messart did, and spoke with a cold, alien voice. In fact, everything about the creature seemed alien, and it was difficult to comprehend that this ancient being was more native to Tyria than any of the humans stood before it. The Seer knew about Glint and the Flameseeker prophecies. It hated the Messart, and, because the heroes were prophesied to do what its entire race could not, it offered aid. With the spectral essence of a nearby phantom, the creature infused the hero's armour with a magical protection, rendering the Messart's Spectral Agony useless, exactly what they needed to be able to fight back. Marcus was close. When Ivinia found him, he taunted her, showing no remorse for his actions and claiming to have enjoyed watching Saidra die. He was flanked by Messart. A battle ensued, but, for the first time, the Messart could be killed. Marcus' corpse lay crumbled on the snow, and at last the lives of those killed at the henge of Den Ravi were avenged. The Shining Blade had made progress. Things had taken a turn for the worse, though, for the Deldrimor dwarves. The Stone Summit had captured Thunderhead Keep, along with the Deldrimor capital city, and without reclaiming these key locations in a counterattack, King Jarlis would lose the civil war to the xenophobic Stone Summit. The heroes were in his debt, and so they granted him their help. With the king by their side, the party marched on the capital. Reclaiming the city and keep was not as difficult as it was to keep them safe. Dagnar Stonepate sent every available Stone Summit soldier he could into the fray before arriving on the scene for himself. A furious battle was waged on the walls that drew attention from all around, and, devastatingly, this attracted the nearby White Mantle. Hoping to trap the Shining Blade inside the keep, they stormed it too, and even Confessor Dorian, the White Mantle's leader, approached, Messart at his side. It was now or never. This was their best chance of finishing the Shining Blade. By rights, the battle should have been lost, but suddenly, re-entering the conflict after a lengthy absence, Vizier Kilbron made himself known. He arrived at the keep, summoning a force of undead that defended the gates. Everything had come to a head. In the Flameseeker prophecies, Glint had written that the peaks and valleys of the Shiver Peaks would be painted in blood. This moment. The battle continued until ultimately both Confessor Dorian and Dagnar Stonepate were on the battlefield. Neither survived. In one climactic battle, Prince Rurik had been avenged, the Stone Summit repelled, and the head of the White Mantle removed. Kilbron had saved their lives once again, and, as he had done at Sanctum K, he told them what to do next. Though the White Mantle had been dealt a serious blow with the death of Confessor Dorian, the Messart themselves still remained. They had been arriving in the Shiver Peaks in such large numbers through a nearby portal, which could be entered to find where they came from. It led to the Fire Island chain, where long ago the gods had cast the Bloodstones. It was not the Masart homeland, but they had stationed many forces here to defend something important to them. Kilbron explained that the Masart were keeping prisoners, magical allies of his that would help the Shining Blade defeat the Masart once and for all. Jarlis believed there was no more treacherous land in all of Tyria other than the Fire Island chain. It was made of active volcanoes that spewed ashes to the sky and lava to the ground. Only the most hostile drakes and beasts could survive there, and now, crowded with Masart, it was near impossible to reign. The Vizier would join them on their trek though, and with that the heroes and a few dwarves entered the portal and passed to the other side. It was just as Jarlis had warned, a hellish place. Any long-term plans in the region would surely end in disaster. The imprisoned allies Kilbron spoke of were in the caldera of the largest volcano, named Abaddon's Mouth. The Masart had built many obsidian gates, strongholds and towers to defend it. In particular was a long wall that encircled the volcano near the top. The only way through was known as the Onyx Gate. Harassed at every turn, they gradually made progress through the hot, craggy landscape. Higher and higher they climbed, into the devastation, and eventually beyond the wall. The Masart grew desperate, for they knew, should the Chosen free their prisoners, they would be doomed. Beyond the wall was a thin pass leading to the inner bowl of the volcano. On this pass stood Optimus Caliph, one of the very same Masart who had appeared to Saul D'Alessio in his time of need in Kryta 2 years ago. Despite his best efforts to stop the trespassers, Caliph was slain, and the Chosen moved on. The caldera presented a striking scene. Floating in the mouth of the volcano was a chunk of the Bloodstone, still remaining despite the eruption that had sent other shards miles across the continent. Upon this floated a series of odd crystals, just like those in the Maguma jungle that had consumed the souls of the dead Chosen. To the side of the Bloodstone was an even more peculiar sight. A tear in the fabric of reality, another portal. It was barred, however, by an immense Masart formation that constrained it and kept whatever was inside from coming out. This was the Door of Kamali. Kilbron explained. This portal led to another realm of existence, and in that realm were trapped allies that could kill the Masart. But they could not escape, because the Door of Kamali had been built to bar it shut. The door, though, needed constant power to stay in use. That power came from the souls of the living. The Masart used these odd floating crystals, called soul batteries, to capture souls and charge the door, but the batteries would only work in the presence of a shard of the Bloodstone. When the Masart ordered the death of innocent Krytans in the Maguma, they had two reasons. First, to delay the Flameseeker prophecies, but second, and more importantly, to keep the Door of Kamali from running out of power. All the heroes had to do then was step onto the Bloodstone, shatter the soul batteries, freeing the captured spirits, and the door would fail. Their allies would escape, and the Masart would be destroyed. With each battery broken, a portion of the door failed, and the captured spirits, gone mad from the Masart magics, attacked. One by one they were felled, and the next battery too. A stream of Masart poured into the caldera, but the heroes could not be stopped, and at last the final battery was broken. The Door of Kamali shifted and opened. The portal was laid bare, and their allies were freed. They crashed down upon the Masart, massacring them, and lastly, without warning, Vizier Kilbron attacked the Shining Blade. 1 year ago. All was doing everything it could to defend itself. Yet the Char had arrived too soon and too strong. The most recent guild war between Ascalon and Kryta had left Or open to attack, their resources spent elsewhere, and the Char were taking advantage of this weakness. They had brought down the Searing on Ascalon, destroying it, and now invasion forces were marching on the two remaining human kingdoms. King Reza, the Orion king, was unprepared, and, like Kryta, Or had no real way to defend itself. Unlike the Krytan king, though, who would flee his throne and abandon his people, Reza would stay and fight to his last. He was dreading the moment, but it eventually came. The Char reached Ara, holy city of the gods. The Orion people considered it their sacred charge to keep where the gods once lived safe, and now in that they had failed. Their defeat was at hand, King Reza at a loss. Vizier Kilbron was there to see it all unfold. He was the king's royal advisor. But unbeknownst to Reza, in the later years of his life, Kilbron had slipped into worship of Abaddon, the fallen god of water and secrets, and come to know of dark magics buried deep beneath Or. When the Char reached Ara on that fateful day, Kilbron, corrupt and under the influence of the fallen god, slipped underground and retrieved an artifact few knew of, the Lost Scrolls. Abaddon wanted the city of the gods, the city of the beings who have imprisoned him, to be destroyed, and Kilbron, preferring this fate than to see it in the hands of the Char, invoked from the scrolls a powerful spell that caused the cataclysm. An explosion swept across the land, killing all man and Char alike for miles around, sinking the entire nation to the depths of the ocean, drowned by the waves. Kilbron himself, though, was not ended by this event. He survived, as an undying lich. His mortal form in life concealed his true self, a terrifying undead beast, and he possessed the ability to control the undead. In time, he had learned of the Titans, beings of fire and malice created by Abaddon in the realm of torment, where the god was trapped. He schemed to free them. But there were two problems. First, the Masat. The race knew of the Titans too, and had built the Door of Kamali to prevent them from ever escaping. Kilbron could not challenge the Masat alone. Second, the Titans, once free, would only obey the one who wielded the Scepter of Awe, and this had gone missing long ago. Kilbron would have to wait until it was found. Perhaps not by chance, just 1 year later, the White Mantle, worshippers of the Masat, had recovered the scepter. They were intent to keep it from him, so the Vizier summoned forth an army of undead, from those killed on Awe during the Cataclysm, and set out to attack the nation and retrieve it for himself. The rest, you know. Now at last, the Titans were free, and the scepter was in his hands. The Shining Blade, Kilbron's pawns, were no longer of any use, and the Lich, unable to secure a quick kill, fled the scene. He opened portals of his own to the corners of Tyria, through which his new army of Titans began to march. If the heroes did not act quickly, all would be lost. Hotly pursuing the Lich, they found the location of the portals. Cutting through Titans with great effort, the heroes closed them once again, drawing the ire of their enemy and baiting him out for one final confrontation atop the Bloodstone. But Vizier Kilbron, the Undying Lich, was not alone. Here, in the last place you would expect him, Hell on Tyria, and at the Lich's side, stood Prince Rurik. He was dead still, murdered months ago by Dagnar Stonepate on the northern Shiver Peaks, but Kilbron had visited the site of his death and reanimated him as a minion of his own. It was a failsafe, a gambit, a play on the hearts of the blade. As Rurik himself was compelled to fight against his will, so were the heroes. Their swords clashed. Before long, it was over, and Rurik once again had been felled. All that remained was the Lich. Outnumbered in the caldera of Abaddon's mouth, portal to the realm of torment laid bare, the Lich made his last stand. Yet, every time he was cut down, he rose once again. During his time, Vizier Kilbron had swallowed the souls of many living, and each time he was ended, he rose anew. But hope was not lost. In fact, this was exactly what gave the Shining Blade the advantage. For every death the Undying Lich suffered, the souls were released and sucked back into the soul batteries, still left floating about the Bloodstone by the Masat hours before. Gradually the batteries charged, and the Door of Kamali reformed. One by one the pieces of the gate rearranged themselves, until at last the portal to Abaddon's realm was barred shut. Then the Lich was spent. He fell to the surface of the Bloodstone one last time, and was still. It was over. The Flameseeker prophecies were complete. A vision of Glint appeared before the heroes to deliver this news, but also to warn that the Fire Island chain had been thrown into instability. Abaddon's mouth would soon erupt, and it was time to flee. Back through the Onyx Gate and abandoned Masat strongholds they ran, back to the portal, and to safety. Only two things were left behind on the Fire Island chain. Rurik's magical sword Sahothin was forgotten, destined to somehow fall into the hands of the Char Ritlock Brimstone 250 years later. And also, left by the Lich's side, was another artifact, the Scepter of Awe. Unlike Sahothin, however, the scepter would not wait to be consumed by the fire and lava. It disappeared, teleported to an unknown location, and was lost for a time to the people of Tyria. Epilogue. The Shining Blade were congratulated on their success. In their short time, the few Titans released had slaughtered the remaining Masat on the Fire Island chain, ending their immediate threat to the Critons. But some Titans had escaped through the Lich's portals before they were closed and had to be hunted down. The group of heroes embarked on one last outing, revisiting where they had once travelled to end their threat. In particular were a group of Titans in Ascalon. It was these fiery beasts that the Char had come to name as gods of their own years before. When they saw the creatures be killed by humans, they lost faith, and the credibility of the Flame Legion, the group of Char that had named them gods in the first place, was severely damaged. This bought King Adalbern more time to save his kingdom, but many long years would pass before that tale came to its tragic end. The threat of Abaddon, imprisoned as he was, had been in some small way revealed by the Flameseeker prophecies. But for now, the heroes knew relative peace. That is, until they received an urgent message from an old friend of Menlo's in the distant lands of Cantha, far to the south. Thanks for watching.